Okay, so I'm going to give the whole, and what that has me thinking about, a lash, because that worked out well for me there in the last one. At least I think it did. No, it did. I think it did. It did as far as I'm concerned, and that's fucking all that matters. All due respect to anybody who might be listening or watching, but we'll give it a lash. So, you can see in front of me, either side of this pedestrian crossing, there's two little ramps. And what that has me thinking about is material science. Because material science is all about the science of different types of materials. And actually, what that has me thinking about is a particular type of ramp that I actually saw. So I think it was, I don't know if it was a non-Newtonian fluid or possibly a Newtonian fluid. I don't know, I can't remember. What the fuck is the difference? It doesn't matter. It was a type of ramp that when you went over it slowly, so the type of material that was made of was a weird type of material. So most people will be familiar with custard. And custard is this kind of soupy substance. But I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this now, but I'm pretty sure custard is what's known as a non-Newtonian fluid, which basically means it's a bit weird. But to be a bit more specific about how it's weird, if you fill a swimming pool, and people have done this, if you Google swimming pool full of custard, people have literally filled swimming pools full of custard. Custard is generally made using a mixture of powders and water, I believe, possibly milk. And if you get, 500 fucking gallons of milk or water or whatever the liquid is, and 100 kilos or maybe 1,000 kilos of mixture for that stuff, the names escape me already, not yogurt, custard, and you fill a swimming pool full of custard, you can literally walk across the top of it. Don't ask me fucking how or why or what the physics or chemistry is behind it. I'm pretty sure I think that's a property of what are known as non-Newtonian fluids. But again, don't quote me on that because I'm not 100%. But the reason that's relevant in relation to the ramps is the reason you can walk that, and the reason you can walk across it, is when you apply a certain amount of force, whatever way it bonds to itself molecularly, you know what I'm trying to say, the harder you kind of try and tear it apart or push it together, the more it reacts to itself. So if you push your hand into if you're not standing on the custard and you're standing beside the swimming pool, looking at the swimming pool full of custard, and you lean over with your arm and you put your hand into it gently, it will feel soupy like it will in a bowl on your kitchen table. And you'll go, there's no fucking way anyone's going to be able to stand on that. It's too liquidy. But when you put all your weight on it, all of a sudden it changes and it becomes literally firm enough for you to walk on. And the same principle applies in this type of ramp that I saw. So if you drive over it slowly, it deforms the shape of the ramp. So it's almost, it flattens it basically. So if you drive over it slowly, you won't even feel it. But if you drive over it at speed, it'll buckle your fucking alloy. How fucking cool is that? And what that has me thinking about is a Renault Laguna car that I used to drive. Because when I was, I think was I 20, thereabouts, I could have been 19, I could have been 21, I got a job as a sales rep and I was on the road. Shout out to David Marry, he used to own Kitchen and Bedroom Components, a company that I was a sales rep for. They supplied kitchen manufacturers with components, hinges and handles and screws. Insane to think that there's an industry in that, but believe you me, there is, and a good one too. But I was on the road and my first car was a 05 Renault Laguna. I was born in 1984 and a 05 car was my first car. It was brand spanking new, a 05 Renault Laguna. So do the math on that. 21. I was 21, fuck. I was 21 when I started driving. I could drive before that. I've been driving my mum's car, but my first car that I had for myself was when I was 21. Anyway, what made me think of the Renault Laguna is that particular model of Renault Laguna that came out in '05 must have had soft as shit alloys, because every time I hit a pothole, not only would I'd hit a pothole and I get a flat wheel and I'd have to put the spare on. But when I went to get the went to get the puncture repaired, the guys would have to do a job on the alloy because it bent the alloy. That's basically what happened. More so than the tyres being damaged, it was the fucking wheel that was caving in. And what got me thinking about talking about fucking KBC? Yeah, the fucking non-Newtonian fluids and the ramps. Fucking gas. Absolutely hilarious. It's gas. My last conversation that I had, so I do podcasts primarily. The whole YouTube thing is relatively new to me, but I do podcasts. I've done something like 300 solos, which is just monologues like this, but I've also done about 40-ish conversations whereby I sit down with somebody, essentially the exact same as Joe Rogan. The way that I've described it before is I've compared it to Joe Rogan and Sam Harris. So what I've said is it's not as serious as Sam Harris, but it's not as silly as Joe Rogan. That's not what I aimed for, but that's just where I kind of tend to lie. What I love about Rogan is it's so free flowing. I don't think I've ever in my life, and I've listened to the man for hundreds of hours, I don't think I've ever seen him look down at a piece of paper and go, oh yeah, the next question I want to ask you is this. And I know a lot of podcasters do that. A guy I'm a huge fan of, Lex Friedman, he does it a lot. He literally has a list of questions he likes to ask his guests, and I really enjoy his conversations. They tend to get a little bit deeper than Rogan's, on average, say. But as with many things in life, you give with one hand and you take with the other. So although having a list of questions to ask somebody is obviously very beneficial, because you get time before the interview to write down all the things that you really want to ask them, and you get to ask your audience, I'm getting this guy on, what do you guys want to fucking know about? And your audience can chime in the comments and tell you what they want to know, and you can collate that and read through it, and you can make sure that you don't forget to ask a particular guest a particular thing. Fucking Super Value's closed, is it, lads? Oh no, it's open. Happy days. So it's great in that sense, but it takes from the flowiness of a conversation. It takes away the natural kind of, what would you call it, lilt or timbre of a conversation, and I think you miss something there. It's not as genuine. And that's not to say that it's not as good. It is. It kind of makes it better on one hand and worse on the other hand. Another guy I'm a big fan of is Chris Williamson. He hosts the Modern Wisdom podcast, and he's great. I love him to bits. He's fucking fantastic. But he will have questions he wants to ask, and to me, it just kind of takes the flow away from a conversation. It's more of an interview. And I'm a huge fan of conversations. I've never interviewed any of my guests. I've sat down with people ranging from 2 to 4 hours, the average being probably around the 2.5 mark. And I've never had the questions written down ever. I don't do that. I don't like it. I think it kind of removes you from the person. You're not as engaged with the person when you're looking down at a piece of paper or looking at your notes or whatever else. And it's not as genuine. And what I would prefer people do, instead of writing down questions and being afraid of not asking a pertinent question to a particular guest, is I'd sooner you not ask the question and forget to ask, let's say, a really important question, and get to come back on and ask him, or fucking email him about it, or say, do you know what, I was talking to you for 14 hours the other day and I never thought to ask you about this thing. What are your thoughts on this thing? There are ways around it, but again, each their own. That's the way I like to roll. Those guys do their own thing and they're incredibly successful, a hell of a lot more successful than I am. But yeah, I'm loving the whole, and what that makes me think of, because as you can see, this is just the way my stream of consciousness works. It's like a dominoes effect. One thing hits another thing, hits another thing, hits another thing. And on that note, I'll chat to you soon.